Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We have a great show planned for you today. We have a guest, Andrew Hacker, who is the author of a new book, Downfall, The Demise of a President and His Party. Couldn't be more timely with the major story in today's New York Times. So we'll get to that shortly. My name is Neil Parekh, executive producer of the New York Times Read Along, and we will be introducing our host, Sree Srinivasan, and our producers, Paula Kiger and Steve Taylor. But first, we'll start with a view of Sree's out Sree's window, a great view of New York City, which we always love to see. And in a moment, I'm sure we'll see Sree as well as we're looking. I think that's Jersey off to the side, just to the right. So go ahead, Sree. Let's bring you on camera. And good morning. How are you? Happy Easter to you.
Good morning. Good morning. Great to see you. I see we got the memo on bright color shirts. That's good.
Exactly. And we already have Jonathan Borstein checking in from the East Village. Always our first viewer, so that's great. And we have someone watching from Twitter, and Ann Bourne as well from Michigan. So we definitely encourage people to let us know where you're watching from, and hit share or mention someone in the comments so that we see them.
Yeah, I want to just welcome everybody and say thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of our Sunday morning. This is our 5th year of the Sunday New York Times Read Along. And we started as just an experiment on trying to learn how to use Facebook Live. And it's turned into a celebration of journalism, media, print, and so much more. And we've developed an online community of people around the world, thousands of people who watch every Sunday. And we've had awesome guests, including folks occasionally from the New York Times. We've been to the home, Neil and I, of the print editor of the New York Times, Tom Jolly, to read the paper with him. Neil got to go to the home of the travel editor to read the travel section in the New York Times with Amy Vershup. That was an amazing example of the kind of community that we have built of speakers, readers, viewers, and we are so grateful to everyone. We love your feedback. We'd love your suggestions for future segments. My email is sree@sree.net, and we'd love for you to connect. We'd love for you to email us or tweet at us at Sree, at Neil Parekh. And we just want to make sure that we get as many people in the world who are interested in news, media, getting good information, have access to it. So please do connect. Please hit share, retweet. Neil, we should say some of the innovations for our show. We started just on Facebook. Now we're on multiple platforms. So you can explain that.
Absolutely. So what we're doing is streaming the show via StreamYard, which is a great app. It really gives us a lot of flexibility. We are live both in Facebook and on LinkedIn and on YouTube. We're also live on Twitter, and today we're actually live on Claudia Dreyfus's page. Claudia Dreyfus is Andrew's wife, and she's watching from his living room and engaging with her friends who are watching on her page. So Claudia, thank you for joining us. We have Karen DeWitt, former New York Times correspondent, and she would have assigned her students to cover it. So now we know that at least going forward, Karen, one of the things we want to make sure you know is that we're actually here every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, often with a guest. And again, we're thrilled to have Andrew Hacker here as our guest this week.
In addition, and
then later,
Maria is with us from Milan, this kind of global community. We should also say that we have some great guests coming up. Neil's going to tell us about them in a minute. But I also have a daily COVID-19 show that I'm grateful that many people here have crossed over and back and forth. And every Sunday night, I do what I call our positivity show, 9 p.m. Eastern. And tonight we have 2 fabulous guests. But the daily show's timings are different. So the best way to find out when I'm live is to follow me on Twitter or Facebook, or to subscribe on YouTube. SreeNet is my YouTube channel, SREENET. Please subscribe. That way you will always know when I'm live, either at the read along or on our daily show. I also have a spinoff on WBAI radio, 99.5 FM here in New York City, and on WBAI.org, 2 hours every Saturday. We call it Coping with COVID-19, a helpful, hopeful call-in show, and people call in from around the world, and we've had some really great listeners and viewers. So here's our Sunday Night Positivity ad so that you can see this. Here you go. Tonight we have Courtney Pulitzer, who's a writer and creative entrepreneur, and M.R. Rangaswamy, who is founder of indiaspora.org, and both of them are joining us from different cities. And it's just a great way to learn and communicate and keep going through this crisis. 31 straight days I've been hosting that show. That means we've been on lockdown for 31 straight days here in New York. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And we want to also remind folks that we have a doctor on our show of the read-along, right? The read-along used to be just us reading the newspaper, but there's so many medical questions that we are now going to bring on a doctor every show at 10 o'clock. So 10 to 10:30 is a chance for you to talk to a physician about what's happening in the world and to get your questions about this. And Dr. Lisa Ganjhu is going to be our expert calling in at about 10 a.m. today. So stay tuned. Please tag your friends right now. Please hit share. That's the best way to get the word out about this show so that more people can join us. And I think we're ready to get started.
And before we start, there are a couple of things that we want to do. First of all, a number of people are joining us. In addition to Carla Barnakis, a great friend of the show, and saying hi to Karen DeWitt.
And former copy chief of the New York Times.
Former copy chief for the New York Times. And Pradnya Haldapur from Silver Spring, Maryland. Karen asked a good question. Is it recast later today? Karen, just so you know, the video, one of the great things about live streaming is that the video will always be available at the same place later today. So if you're watching on Facebook, you can go right back to this link whenever you want to watch it. Maria is saying great job. Maya is saying good morning. And let's see who else. Sandra Yin from Rockville. And our good friend, let's see here. There's moving so fast, I can't even hit the buttons fast enough, which is great. Stefan Kaplan, our close friend from Ramsey, New Jersey. Always great to see you. Ravi from Trivandrum in India. And yes, as we said earlier, happy Easter to everyone who is celebrating this holiday. So I want to welcome another important introduction, Paula Kiger, who is one of our producers on in Facebook. So I'm going to bring in Paula right now onto the screen.
Morning.
Paula, good morning. How are you?
Great. Good to see you all and see all of our audience.
And I also want to bring in Steve Taylor. So Steve, thank you for joining us as well. One of the things that we do with our live broadcast is that we, in addition to my producing the show from StreamYard, kind of on the back end, we have someone, Paula Kiger, is in our Facebook post, under Shree's Facebook post, leaving comments, engaging with the audience, providing links to the stories that we're talking about. Steve is going to be doing the same in LinkedIn. And one of the tricks with LinkedIn is LinkedIn and StreamYard haven't figured out their API yet, their connection. So if you have a comment on LinkedIn, Steve will send it to me via WhatsApp. That's a trick in terms of production. When you're doing a show like this, what you want to do is to have a way to connect with your producers, connect with your team on the back end. So we can send each other messages and make sure that everyone is in sync. So please, thank you, Paula. Thank you, Steve, for all the great work that you do to make this show a success.
Absolutely.
And Sree, thank you as always for hosting it and letting us be part of your great time on Sunday mornings.
Thank you, and thanks to the three of you. You've made this into a really professional setup, and thanks to all of the work that you've done, you've shown people how it is to make really engaging virtual events, and people have been hiring me and my team now to do events like this. So if you're interested, please email me, sree@sree.net, and we'll show you how to do great events, how to stream on multiple platforms, how to take, as we did this week, a conference for 300 people around the world, originating out of Germany and the US. And Steve and I got to work on that, which was fantastic. And we made for them a very compelling conference. So talk to us, email us, and we will help you think about your virtual events and how to make them even better. So thank you, folks. And let's keep those comments coming in, and know that this is all recorded so you can watch on any of the platforms, but subscribing is the best way to go. Subscribe to your daily newspaper and subscribe to us on YouTube. SreeNet is the SREENET is the way to find us.
Absolutely. Great. So thank you, Paula. Thank you, Steve. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
So Sree, we'll get on with our show. We have a great show with Andrew Hacker talking about his book and just incredible timing in terms of the major story in the New York Times this morning. Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Let's just show people very quickly a little bit of what's in store and why they should be tagging their friends right now and why they should be hitting share so that their friends can join us from around the world. On the front page, there's a column. There's a 4-column story with 6 bylines about how much the president knew and when he knew it. Despite timely alerts, Trump was slow to act. So we're going to read that. Empty shelves, but farms put food to waste. In regions' nursing homes, residents are sitting ducks. Pivotal moment arises for Biden and for Cuomo. Bending rules, priests in Italy aid the sick at their own peril. Gratitude and immunity as the first U.S. survivors tiptoe into a new world. So that's just on the front page. We could spend the week there, but we have the book review. We have the arts and leisure cover about Dua Lipa. And I wanted to show you a couple of things that I hope we'll get time to later. But look at this cover story of the travel section. It's actually a fold out so that you can look at the Caribou lessons. I mean, fantastic use of graphic design and photography. That's one of the reasons why we celebrate the print paper and why we make sure we are always looking at the print section. And here's a new, unusual section in print. It's called a special section. In solidarity in times of social distancing, people are coming together. And so thank you. You can cut it out, color it, and tape it to your window or door. So much great material here. So we hope we'll get a chance to look at all of this later. So this is a reason to get a print newspaper because all newspapers are trying to stay connected and engage their audience. So I think we are now ready with that little preview to bring in Andrew and to talk to him. Hi, Andrew.
Good morning, Sree.
How are you, sir?
Keeping very well, thank you.
So I'm just going to jump in here in case we're having trouble with Sree's audio. Andrew, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Sree, just want to check with you. We'll bring you back in. There you go, Sree.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm having trouble hearing Andrew for a minute. So why don't you get started, and then I will give you a signal when I can hear him again.
Sure. Maybe log off, log back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Andrew, sorry about that. But sometimes with live shows, you have to step in and play with the tech. But thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. When you wrote a book, this is where I want to get right down to business. Wrote a book on the downfall, the demise of a president and his party. When were you writing the book? What was the time frame?
Shortly after Mr. Trump got elected in November 2016. First of all, we know that he didn't get a majority of the popular vote. And my question was, well, how much support does he have? Because somebody like Mr. Trump, if he wants to get reelected, has to expand his base. And the question was, has he been doing this? And my answer is absolutely no. This is based on studies of all the elections since the time he came in, those in 2017, 2018, 2019. I've studied a total of 517 elections. And out of these are my tea leaves, I've come to the conclusion there is no way he can get reelected, including the barrier of the Electoral College.
And you were looking at this right away after the election. When did your book? When did you actually finish writing the book? When was it ready for publication?
Yes, well, as you know, books have a gestation period.
Right.
It went to press, I would say, what are we now in April? In November. Yes, in November. So, of course, it was before the coronavirus, but that doesn't affect my findings whatever. In fact, if anything, the virus, sadly, will ensure his defeat all the more so.
Well, certainly, with the news today, I think that, even earlier in the week, as you and I were talking, there was some, maybe some people had some questions if he is seen as handling this issue effectively. Some people may see that. Some people may think that. I think the incredible work done by the New York Times today would disavow anyone of that opinion rather quickly.
Okay, this is an important point you make, Neil. In fact, I'm not interested in polls. I'm not interested in what people say when somebody calls them up and asks their opinion. Nor am I interested, for that matter, in what people in diners in central Ohio have to say. What I'm really interested in is voting, because voting is an act. It's something that takes a bit of time. You have to schedule it in your day, find a postage stamp if you're doing it by mail. You have to wait in the rain, as we saw people in Milwaukee. And the votes are important. That's the real thing. And all the votes since 2017, April of 2017, have gone against Mr. Trump.
Interesting. So you have and you have some data behind that, right? Some numbers.
Mountains of numbers. I gave you a few about the. Here we are. I call this the big switch. Let's take the midterm elections of 2018 and compare them with the presidential election 2 years earlier. You can see what the Democratic vote was and what the Republican vote was. Sure, Hillary Clinton came out almost 3 million votes ahead. But if we go over to the midterms, where most people, don't vote, but in 2018 was different. 93% of Democrats turned out. See, 60 million as opposed to 65, that's 93% turned out. The Democratic lead was over 9 million. Now, and by the way, the midterms were not about health care. They were not about immigration or guns. They were a referendum on Donald John Trump. And as you can see, the preponderance of votes, 55% or more, are against him. And that's going to carry over, without doubt, in 2020.
Okay. And then there's other data that you have as well.
Could you put that slide back again?
Sure.
Let me show you another thing. Between 2016 and 2018, notice the Republican vote. 62 million plus 50 million. 12 million Republicans did not turn out. I repeat that. 12 million Republicans who had voted for Trump did not turn out 2 years later. That's not Republican behavior. They generally do turn out for midterms. This really shows that an important chunk of Republicans are not there for him anymore.
Interesting. It's certainly interesting. And then there's an additional piece that you had sent that you'd want to speak to around looking at a longer term analysis.
Okay,
Right?
this gets into, you have to forgive the professor here, and that's what I am in my day job. This is about the problem of the Electoral College, and you'll have to allow me a minute or two on this. Notice that Hillary 2016 lost the Electoral College by 77 votes. Shouldn't have happened, we say, because she got a popular majority. Well, if we look back to Clinton's 2 years and then Obama's 2 years, what we discover is that those two guys could surmount the Electoral College. Look at their Electoral College leads, up there. How did they do it? Well, the sad thing for Hillary Clinton was she only got 51% of the popular vote. That's not good enough for Democrats. The system is skewed against Democrats. If Democrats want to have a president, as they had with Clinton and with Obama, you've got to have at least 52% of vote. Now, it may say, hey, that's only 1 percentage point. That's another 3 million votes. And if you get up to 52%, as Joseph Biden is going to do, you will bring in marginal states like Iowa. You'll bring back Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, carry Arizona, and that will surmount the Electoral College. Biden is going to win the Electoral College, not outstandingly, but my surmise is 61%. I'd even raise 61 seats. I'll even raise it to 63.
Great. We have some comments that I want to bring in, and we have Sree as well. Sree, have we resolved audio issues? You can hear us, and we need to turn your mic on so we can hear you. So it's on the screen. Sree, we can hear you now. Great.
Well, such great analysis. Thank you, Professor. In terms of
it'll be on the final exam.
Yes, we love that. But you said that the coronavirus doesn't change your analysis. You still think that Donald Trump will not win. But do tell us how the virus will affect the as far as you can tell, because isn't the answer that nobody really knows what's going to happen?
Nobody knows with the virus, of course, but people will continue to vote as they did in Wisconsin, and we saw that. It was sad that they had to line up, but they did. And what the 2018 midterms showed us was that Democrats were self-starters. They didn't need a lot of money behind the campaigns. They didn't need a lot of high-tech support. They were just going out to vote against Donald Trump. And by the way, this was not just in the two coasts. The turnabout came in Oklahoma, South Carolina. We saw in 2019 in Kentucky. This is nationwide. A substantial majority of Americans, I would say 55, 56%, just want to get rid of Donald Trump. Unfortunately, so much of what we hear are the Trump people because they make good copy. Democrats, I'm afraid, are not as copygenic.
So in terms of what we are looking at in the weeks and months ahead, talk about the role of what they call a wartime president, and he is all about television and his image. So what are the chances that people will continue to support him because of that wartime footing?
Well, as you know, our model for the wartime president was Franklin Roosevelt, and he was a national president. And when he mobilized us for the war, it was a nation together. Our current president is not a national president. He doesn't even try to be. Even when he's talking about the virus, he slips in something about Sleepy Joe or what's his name for Schumer? I won't say Fat Schumer, but whatever he calls him, or Crazy Nancy. He still does that. That's not a national president. That's not a wartime president. and the voters know that.
Thank you. Let's bring Neil back so we can also support our wonderful sponsors. That's also one of the things that if you haven't joined us in a while, this show now has sponsors, which is really exciting.
It is really exciting, and I want to call out a comment from one of our sponsors, Ron Thomas. Every week we have such interesting guests. I'm like a student rushing to log in for my Sunday learning opportunity. In addition to being a sponsor, Ron is just an incredible supporter of the show, was a guest back in January, and always makes it a point. He's based in Dubai, but makes it a point to log in, whether he's in Dubai, when he was traveling, wherever he was from. So really want to thank and appreciate all of our sponsors and all of the support that we've gotten. We really couldn't, we're able to do more with the show and take it to new levels with the support that we're getting. So just a little word about our sponsors. Strategy Focus Group, which is Ron's firm, is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Muckrack helps you discover news as it breaks, easily generate reports, and explore the work of journalists, podcasters, bloggers, and more. Muckrack software helps PR teams build stronger relationships with the media. And if you're a journalist, you might also be eligible for their free tools to identify trends and showcase your work. Tweepsmap, our third sponsor, helps you build personalized relationships with your audience with focused, straightforward, actionable analytics and an all-in-one intelligent publishing platform. Thank you to Ron Thomas of Strategy Focus Group, Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, and Samir Al-Batran from Tweepsmap for your support of the New York Times Read-Along. If you're interested in sponsoring the New York Times Read-Along, please do contact us. We'd be happy to work with you on a sponsorship package. We'll put my information on the screen. You can email me at neil@neilparekh.org. And we certainly look forward to working with you on this show.
Thank you,
Sree?
Neil. We were just
Absolutely.
paying the bills, Professor. Thank you, Neil, and thanks to all those wonderful sponsors. So let's take a look at the New York Times. And first, let's also ask the professor to tell us his thoughts on the paper itself. Generally, what does the New York Times mean to you? How is it part of your life?
Well, first of all, let me tell you who is the most important person at the Times as far as I'm concerned. His name is Rod Anderson. He lives in the Bronx. He gets up at 3:30 every morning and comes down to Manhattan and delivers my newspaper. Without Rod, I wouldn't be able to talk to you today. And I'm sure there are a lot of other Rods around the city who we never see at 6 in the morning who are doing this. As far as the paper is concerned, one of the first sections I turn to is the book review, because I'm a book person. And I think there's a fantastic review on the front page of the book section today. It's by George Will, and a review of an anthology of conservative writings. And one of the remarkable things about George Will, who, as you know, is a venerable conservative, is on the jump, he starts out, gets into the review by quoting Karl Marx. Yes, Communist Manifesto, and approvingly, because Marx talked about how capitalism sweeps away all fast, venerable relationships and so on. And Will says American capitalism claims to be conservative, but it's the most radical thing around. And that's really a marvelous essay. I recommend it to everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, we're looking at the cover shot of the New York Times book review right here. And you're right, American Conservatism, Reclaiming an Intellectual Tradition, edited by Andrew Besovich. And the review is by George Will. And I love the title, Eyes Right.
Yes, and by the way, Will is absolutely right, and I hope I can say this Sunday morning, so was Karl Marx. Capitalism is revolutionary. My favorite example of this is the pharmaceutical industry, which a generation or so ago discovered they can make huge profits by selling a pill we now call the birth control pill. And because that pill was so popular, the sexual revolution began. That was capitalism's doing, the sexual revolution. And hey, a lot of people may not like it, but it's in their accord.
Thank you. We have some questions for you, Professor, and we want everyone to submit their questions. We love seeing these. And the question for the professor is, what do you think of the possibility of the election being postponed? Thanks, Pradnya.
No, the election will not be postponed. Constitutionally, it would be very difficult. There's no national date, but all the states have agreed on this. No, I think we'll have a lot of mail balloting, and our Supreme Court, our Republican Supreme Court, is going to come around and not object to mail balloting.
The president is making right now by saying mail-in ballots are fraud and there's so many problems with it. Isn't he setting the stage for a way to have an excuse if he loses, and also maybe to set the stage for trying to say the election should be postponed?
Well, this is interesting. No, the election is no way going to be postponed. I think that just isn't going to happen. There is the question, though, as to whether there can be more absentee or mail ballots. And a lot of state laws are ambiguous on this. It's again going to come up to the Supreme Court, and it's going to be a real test of the court, because the court now has a 5-4 Republican majority. And notice I call it Republican. And I may say that the Times has recently stopped calling Alito, and Clarence Thomas, and Gorsuch conservative judges. The Times now calls them Republican appointed judges. Well, the question is whether those 5 appointed jurists are going to call the political tune really for the rest of their tenure. And Chief Justice Roberts has to decide whether he's going to be the 5th vote. And he goes back and forth on this. But if he then stays too long with that 5-person Republican majority, there's going to be a tremendous national outcry against the court. It's going to be redolent of what happened in Franklin Roosevelt's second term.
Thank you, Professor. Therese, a great friend of this program, asks, how will access or lack of access to mail-in balloting impact the election?
Would you repeat that question?
So what is the lack of access to mail-in balloting? How will that impact the election?
In fact, less than we would think. Let's take even more along that line. Voter suppression. The notion that you have to have a driver's license, the notion that you can't do early balloting, you can't do after church balloting, that sort of thing. Tremendous voter suppression. And if we look at 2018, despite voter suppression, except in one case in Georgia, where she lost the election because of suppression, in the other 49 states, the Democrats turned out in numbers, despite all the hindrances that were put up by Republican legislatures. That's going to happen in 2020. People are going to go, I call them self-starters. They don't need to knock on their doors. Don't need to send them banners on their iPhones. They're going to turn out the way they did in 2018.
Professor, I love your confidence. That's the great part of a prognosticator, is to be confident with their prognostications, and you're doing just that. We have a question from Linda Bernstein, who is one of my partners in all my digital efforts and ventures, and she says, I've read that we don't know exactly what emergency powers mean for the president. The documents are that secret.
Yes, well, this president, as we all know, is unlike any we have ever had. There's no parallel. Totally mercurial and Mercury, like, I don't know, when I was a kid, we used to steal mercury from the school labs, that silvery stuff that you put on a table and watch it you move around. That's sort of man he is. He has no principles. He has no fixed ideas except his own ego. And as a result, if he says one thing one day about mail ballots or another about war powers, he's just talking. He's just blather. And hey, his base cheers him on, but his base grows smaller every year. Notice I said his base lost 12 million voters between 16 and 18. It's even smaller now.
Are you surprised by how he has been handling the chance to connect with people? Even in this crisis, he hasn't veered from his way of working, which is to lie and do showmanship over facts.
Well, his supporters love his lies, so and they cheer him. And by the way, he does have these rallies. It's really fascinating to me. I've never seen anything like Trump's rallies in all my studies of politics. Democrats have never had anything like them. And we watched them on television, or these clips from them, and people just cheering and roaring and bellowing. Okay, the typical arena where he goes holds about 12,000 people. And even if it has 100 of those rallies, it doesn't add up that much in the electorate. And we saw that in 2018. Not that many people, not enough, turned out for him, even to keep the House of Representatives. So, in this sense, he doesn't appeal to the nation as a whole. He appeals just to the already converted. And I think he deludes himself into thinking his base is much bigger than it is. But I'm sure he could read the numbers, like the slide we put up a little earlier. 12 million Republicans dropped away.
Yeah, let's look at that one more time so that people who've just joining us, Professor Andrew Hacker, who's a political scientist and author of a new book about the president and the downfall of the Republican Party, has this slide that shows you the difference in the number of people who voted in the 2016 general election and the 2018 midterms. And typically, fewer people vote in the midterms, but you can see the fall off in the Republican numbers versus the fall off in the Democratic numbers. And the professor had a really good line where he said he doesn't believe in polls, he believes in votes. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And we have a question from Janet Walsh, who asks, what are the kinds of changes in the political system that the professor sees after the pandemic?
I think voting by mail is certainly one. And by the way, there are certain states, some states now, like Oregon, where all voting is by mail. I mean, Oregon is fantastic. Every registered voter gets a ballot in the mail, whether they ask for one or not. And I like, by the way, the envelope. We used to call them business reply envelopes, where you don't have to put a stamp on. That's great, because if you have to find a stamp, it's amazing how many American homes no longer have a stamp in the home. So that's certainly one thing. Apart from that, I can't see much change. You know, the Electoral College was last tinkered with in the year 1804. 1804, that's over 2 centuries ago. We're stuck with the Electoral College. We're stuck with the Senate. And by the way, on this, are Democrats going to carry the Senate? That is tricky. And here, I'm not as certain as I am about other things. I would say, don't be surprised that the Senate, my guess at this point would be the Senate will end up 50-50. Yeah, 50-50, which means Mike Pence has the casting vote. Because if the Democrats carry 5 states that they take away from Republicans, but they're going to lose Alabama again, I'm afraid. So with that net, it'll be 50-50. If the Democrats carry North Carolina, then there will be a Democratic majority, 51-49. And that is just possible because Democrats have won the governorship in North Carolina. So maybe by the end of the week, I'm going to predict 51-49 for the Democrats in the Senate. But we can't change the Senate. Allow the professor one other thing. I sat down one afternoon and I counted up all the votes cast for our current 100 senators. All the votes cast over a 6-year period, because it's in 3 stages, cast of all the votes. The Republican senators, there are now 53 of them. You want to guess? What percentage of the total senatorial electorate chose those 53 Republican
No,
senators?
go ahead. Please tell us.
46%. In other words, the 53 Republican senators have a mandate, if you like, from only 46% of the electorate. And yet, on the basis of that, they can put in Supreme Court judges and pass that last regressive tax bill.
Thank you, Professor. Wayne says his supporters love his lies. Got it in 5 words. So that is a good way to kind of explain what's happening. We have people watching from around the world. Thank you for being here. You're listening to a conversation with a great political scientist, Andrew Hacker, and we are going to be reading the New York Times, taking your questions and comments. So please do jump in here. Tell us where you're watching from. Please tag your friends so that they can join us as well. Hit share wherever you are. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn. So if you aren't connected with me on those platforms, please find me and please hit share so that people can join us. We have some great comments coming in and questions. Jody asks, how can we engage the Sanders voters? I'm afraid that these voters will not come out and vote in November. We know that in the last election, something like 11% of Bernie's voters voted for Trump. This time, isn't there a chance that they'll be even more upset and more angry and will either sit out or not, or vote against Trump or any third party candidate that shows up?
Okay, this is a critical question. What Democrats have out there is a pool, here's a number again, of about 75 million potential Democrats. How do I get 75 million? I go back to 2008, when Obama swept in that year with 65 million votes, so ahead of John McCain. Now, if we come 12 years later, the electorate is expanded. So that 65 million that went for Obama is now 75 million. They are going to come out for Joe Biden. No, they're not so much for Joe Biden. They're going to come out to get rid of Trump. And at this point, the Sanders voters are just as down on Trump as anybody else. So they're not going to sit on their hands. And by the way, there's better chemistry, really, between Biden and Sanders than there ever was with Clinton and Sanders. And that will seep through. So there's going to be a turnout. And there's going to be, I would say, at least 52%. It may not be up 75 million, but it'll be enough to turn the Electoral College.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Let's keep getting some more of the questions and comments coming in. Please tag your friends. And we also want to thank our sponsors for being such great supporters of the show. If you are a potential sponsor of our read along or of my daily COVID-19 call, please do write into us and let us know. I want to give a shout out to the folks at Mugcrack. They also gave me this nice mug. And we also have some links on that we're going to put into our Facebook where you can see and support each of our sponsors. Just click in so that people can take a look, and they will know that people who watch our show also support our sponsors. So when you see the URL, as you do right now on your screen, please go in and click into a couple of those folks. They're all doing fascinating work. You will want to engage with them. You'll want to get to know them by clicking on those specific links. They can track it back to us. We live in a world where all this tracking is part of what we do. So thank you very much. I also saw Claudia Dreyfus, who's watching from Andrew's living room, engaging with the audience, which is a lot of fun. And I think that's a really cool thing that we're able to be live and have these connections. Here's a question. If Biden is the nominee, won't his diminishing cognitive abilities be a factor? Thanks. So that's presuming there are diminishing cognitive abilities, but just the general question of what happens between now and the fall in terms of what is locked in already? This is a question that many people have asked. We have two elderly candidates. If something happens to either of them, what is the system in which they can be replaced on the ballot?
Okay, if something happens to the president, obviously his party will elevate down Mike. How can you call that man Mike? I mean, he doesn't look like a Mike. Michael. Anyway, Michael Pence would be put, and he would be just duck suit shooting gallery to defeat. What happens is the Republican National Committee gets together and they choose a vice president. That's after the convention. Otherwise, the convention do it. And the same thing with the Democrats. If something happens to Biden after the convention, then the vice president will fix. So that's okay. Now, something else that relates to this is in today's Times, and that's in the Sunday Review section. There's a very good article, very interesting article by a Yale historian named David Blight about how Republicans are wedded to voter suppression. But what he starts out with is interesting. He underlines that the Republicans are a minority party. And if you go look at the slide I had a little while ago on the electoral college, we see that Democrats won the popular vote in 6 of the last 7 presidential elections. 6 of the last 7. Republicans are a minority party. And the question is, they're not getting the vote to carry the electoral college. Well, they slipped through with 78,000 in the 3 key states. I have a chapter in my book. I call them those 3 states. We know what they are. We can not leave. You know, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. He slipped in with 28,000. Take the 2018 midterm election. Those 3 states, they elected senators, governors, representatives. Democrats carried those 3 states by 1.2 million. They lost it by 80,000. 2 years later, they carried it by 1.2 million. And they will again. There aren't enough Republicans. If I may take a minute, half my book is about the Republican Party. The Republican Party is based on what I call a concordat. Primarily, it's the party of wealth and profits. And we saw that with the regressive tax bill, pay off the corporations and the investors and so on. But there aren't enough executives and investors to carry more than a few precincts. So Republicans need ground troops. So in the concordat, they have made a deal with people who are opposed to abortion and people who love their guns. Those 2 groups are the solid base of the Republican Party. Anti-abortion, hey, not just guns, military-style weapons. So the executives in their country clubs just turn their eyes away when clinics are closed or repeating rifles end up in every closet. But that's the Republican coalition. But it's not enough. It's too small. It's a minority party, and it's getting smaller every year.
And that's the article we were looking at, 150 Years of Suppression by David Blight, a professor of history at Yale and the author most recently of Frederick Douglass' Prophet of Freedom, which won the 2019 Pulitzer Prize. So thank you for pointing out that article, Professor Hacker. Marcy asks, what's your forecast for the GOP and the expats who are disgusted by its current state of being? How will it transform?
I'm sorry, did you say expats?
Yeah, the the former Republicans or the never Trumpers. What is your forecast for them?
Well, there we saw that. As we saw on that first slide I had up, Republicans lost 12 million voters between 2016 and 2018. And a lot of those, most of them, I would say, are people who were country club, suburban, soccer mom Republicans and just sat it out. They didn't vote for Democrats. They sat it out. Take one state, Iowa, which is a more Republican state than a purple state. Iowa Trump carried easily. House of Representatives, they have 4 seats, 3 were Republican. That was in 2016. Just 2 years later, the House seats flipped, 3 Democrats, 1 Republican. And in 2018, 200,000 Republicans stayed home. Whereas all the Democrats turned out, 200,000 Republicans stayed home. Why'd they stay home? They had voted for Trump and they just couldn't do it again. Hey, that's a tea leaf. That's very important.
Thank you, Professor. At World Professor says, David Blight worked so hard to analyze the ways that Reconstruction still shapes our world today. All right, so let's pause on the questions and actually get into the paper a little bit and this incredible story in the Times about what the president knew and when he knew it. And the answer is he knew a lot. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the story yet. If you want to comment on it, we'll also try to look at some of the facts that are in this story.
Actually, Rob delivered my paper just about 40 minutes ago. No, it says what Trump knew and when he knew it. Come on now. Trump doesn't know things. I mean, imagine if a 10-page report came to him. No, he's not a reader. He's hardly a listener. At best, he gets his information from Fox News, or if you want to call it news. And he's different from any other president we've had. And in this sense, who cares whether he didn't know? Maybe pieces of paper came into his Oval Office. But he absorbed what Sean Hannity tells him.
And so we saw there's a front page story. It goes into a full page on page 13, and then a 2-page full spread fold out here in the paper. And it really talks about everything that he knew. The president's reliance on his instincts led to a halting and late response, the consequences of chaos, and how different people alerted him, and he still didn't care. So let me just read the first paragraph so that people can understand this. And the article has bylines by Eric Lipton, David Sanger, Maggie Haberman, Michael Scheer, Mark Mazzetti, and Julian Barnes. And the dateline is Washington. Any way you cut it, this is going to be bad. A senior medical advisor at the Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Carter Metcher, wrote on the night of January 28 in an email to a group of public health experts scattered around the government and universities. The projected size of the outbreaks already seems hard to believe. A week after the first coronavirus had been identified in the US and 6 long weeks before President Trump finally took aggressive action to confront the danger the nation was facing, a pandemic that is now forecast to take the lives of tens of millions, tens of thousands of American lives, Dr. Mecker was urging the upper ranks of the nation's public health bureaucracy to wake up and prepare for the possibility of far more drastic action. And that's just the start of this incredible story that everybody should read and should find. And this is also the value of journalism and reporting. For anyone from Fox News who only gets the news from watching the press conference, the president very confidently says that he shut it down, and meaning the travel from China. 40,000 people came after he said he shut it down. He says he shut down the European travel. It was all piecemeal. And anyway, his idea of solving problems is border control. And we have seen that border control does not work for many things, and it certainly doesn't work for a virus. And here we are all these months and weeks later with these terrible problems. One thing that I want to remind folks is that the first cases were identified in South Korea and the United States on the same day. And now look at the difference where South Korea is. And to all of you who are watching, I just want to say New York City is the epicenter. And we have now reached this surreal moment where New York City has more people who have died from
the virus than any other country except the United States. And I want to ask the professor, who is kindly spending the morning with us, what does this say about America? What does this say about the greatest country on earth, as Donald Trump keeps reminding us? What does it say about the medical system? What does it say about the social fabric of this country, that people are continuing to be bankrupt by this disease and other medical issues? You look at the front page of the paper, it is filled with problems of our nursing homes and farms and stores. Just can you talk about that, please? As what does this moment tell us about America and its so-called greatness on every level?
Okay, here we go. It tells us the importance of the presidency. We saw that in the difference between Herbert Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt. Herbert Hoover was a nice man, but he was very much in the Trump mode. He said, it's not the job of the federal government to do things. And you know, we're talking about 1929. Herbert Hoover was president for all of 29, all of 1930, all of 1931, didn't do a thing. Same thing today. Of course, much different style. If we had had President Hillary Clinton, things would be totally different. It's not that she's a charismatic figure. She's not. But she's wonkish. She's a policy person. She would have called in commissioners of health from all the states, got a National Health Council doing it together. Of course she would have. Joseph Biden would have done the same thing. Democrats do that. They believe in government. Republicans don't believe in government, except when they want to loot it on their own terms. So yes, it's the tragedy of our time is to have had this man as president. And by the way, there was no stopping him. Just let me take a second on this. I have a chapter in the book called How We Got Him. How we got him. You know what I mean, how we got him. And I show how he ended up being the Republican nominee, and the Republicans couldn't do anything about it because anybody can enter the sweepstake. Anybody can enter, enter the primaries, try to become. And he went in almost as a lark. But because the rest of the field was so wishy-washy, he rose to the top. He only got 45% of the primary votes, but he was the leader. And that's how we got him. And it almost happened with the Democrats. Notice we had 20 Democrats going in before we ended up with Biden. So this was the bad luck of our system. Can the parties change to have a more disciplined type of nominating process? Don't count on it. Hey, America's the land of the free, and sometimes we extend freedom to almost anything. Anybody can join the sweepstakes.
All right. Thank you, Professor. For those of you watching, we have about another half hour with the professor. We have an hour left in the show. We're going to be joined by Dr. Lisa Ganjhu, who is a fascinating doctor who has been working night shifts at NYU Langone in the emergency room. She's going to join us at 10 a.m. Eastern. So we have about half an hour before she joins us. But in the meantime, we're talking politics and the future of this country, the future of the Republican Party. And we have some comments coming in that I'm going to just bring up here so that you can see. We have a comment from LinkedIn that has come in. Let's see if we can get that up there. We also are going to show you, the comment is, thank you, Sree, Susan Soriano says, and your team for this. The New York Times read along has become an essential part of my weekend routine. Thank you so much. It should be part of everyone's routine. Anya Schifrin says, Joe and I are riveted. And those of you who know Anya Schifrin know that the Joe she's talking about is Joe Stiglitz is watching. Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate in economics. We've always wanted to do an Anya and Joe New York Times read along. So I hope we'll be able to do that soon. I hope everyone watching is staying healthy, staying safe. Please make sure that you're following the guidelines for your country. Different countries have different guidelines, but one of the things that we know is staying home works. If you are not an essential worker, and a salute to all the essential workers at the moment. Claudia says, hello to my former students, Amy, Whitney, and hello to colleagues, Belinda Cooper, who teaches human rights law at Columbia SIPA. Hugs to all you SEPA folks, including our program director, Anya Schifrin. So very nice conversation. We, as our wonderful producer, Steve Taylor, says, we are not socially distant, we're physically distant. And that's what's happening. Now, we want to show you a screenshot of a New York Times, of a book review of an article. So we're going to pull that up here now. Let's take a look. This is going to be a chance also. So we want to do a shout out to our wonderful production team. So this is The Persistence of Inequality. Tom Wicker did this review. Can you talk about this, Professor?
Wow. That was the time I was on the front page of the New York Times book review many years ago. Yes, I wrote a book called Two Nations, Black and White, Separate, Hostile, Unequal. And it became really a bestseller. And I wrote about the two races in America. People sometimes ask me, that book came out, I think, in 1992, would I rewrite it, bring it up to date? And the answer is no, I wouldn't. I think what I said back then is just the same today. Now, I know the country is more varied, and we have a lot of people of other origins, particularly Asian, Hispanic, and so on, but we still have two principal races. You know, Latinos are not a race, Chinese Americans are not a race, but black and white are. And I'm afraid the tensions, the hostilities, the unfairness, the inequities are as strong today compared with what we are and back in when I wrote that book.
And we are seeing, tragically, the effects of that inequality and the fact of how African Americans are representing in many states, say 20% of the state, but 40% of the cases, 15% of the state, 80% of the coronavirus cases. So this is what you said in 92 is absolutely true today. The healthcare system, the financial system, the political system are all rigged against folks of our minorities in this country. And we're also seeing the class system play a role. And this is a problem. Ann Kirchner says, excellent discussion, Sree, sets us all up for a thoughtful week. Thank you, Anne. Anne is a former guest of the New York Times Read Along and a fabulous professor herself. All of you, please send us suggestions for future guests on the New York Times Read Along, as well as on the show that I do, the daily COVID-19 call. And Anya says, thanks for the shout out. We have hundreds of comments coming in, so we're trying to keep up with everybody's comments, and we're going to pull some up here. We're also going to get back to the paper. We have about 25 minutes with Professor Hacker. Professor, tell us about your teaching, how you are teaching right now. Tell us about the courses you teach, and are you part of the Zoom revolution?
I'm teaching from home, as almost all other teachers are, and I was invited to use Zoom. And I don't want to get into the technicalities of teaching, but I have a class of 28 students in American politics, 28. If I had Zoom, I would have 28 little boxes across the top of my screen. And I watched some people doing that, and I said, I can't do that. The 28 little boxes just is not the simulation of a classroom. So I decided, believe it or not, to do my teaching by email. Yes, email. 10:45, I get 28 emails. I hope that many. Students simply sending me a short email on the subject line, present. Okay, I know they're there. I have previously given them some questions for homework and asked them to write out no more than a 5-line response. Okay, and I say, take your time, write 20 lines and then compress it to 5. Be precise and precise. I then put all of their replies up on the screen for everybody to read, so everybody can read what everyone else in the classroom is saying. Now, in most classes of 28, you have a few students who raise their hand and some who never talk. In this one, everybody participates because they all know and they see what each other said. Then I ask them, and anyway, the emails go back and forth, back and forth. You know, I've been reading the novels of Anthony Trollope. And so novels depend on people sending letters back and forth. No telephone, no email, just letters back and forth. And when you write letters, you have to think twice before you write things down. And that's what happened in class. So I've discovered in many ways, writing beats talking. And I think the class is going pretty well.
I'm still recovering from thinking of an email-based course, but you've made it work for your students at Queens College. That is fantastic. We may try a read-along where it's all done by email and see how that works. But this shows the importance of innovation, trying different things, and it doesn't have to be the latest newfangled technology. And that's why you still subscribe to the print paper. And by the way, Anne says Professor Hacker, CUNY and Queens College proud. That's terrific. We want to just get through a couple of more stories. We're still going to highlight some questions that are coming in. And Anya Schifrin has said she will come on the show. So thank you, Professor, for making that happen. But also want to say she said she will buy your book, and that's important. We want everybody who can afford it to buy the book right now. Let's remind people of the title. It's called Downfall, and the author's name, he's right on the screen with us, is Andrew Hacker. Professor Hacker is a veteran professor and a political scientist. And Sandra Yin says, yes, the Zoom gallery view is overwhelming. So there you have someone who agrees with you. So everyone, please do buy the book if you can. It would be great way to show support of this show, and also to support the professor for being with us so early on a Sunday morning. We have another 20 minutes or so, folks. Please tag your friends. There's somebody in the world who would benefit from being right here with us right now. They can also watch the recording later. So we'll be live right now as we are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And the archive will start right after we're off the air. In 20 minutes, we're going to have a wonderful doctor joining us who will help us talk about the medical stories. I'm also saving the New York Times Magazine cover on the front lines of a doctor in the life and death shift in Italy. I'm saving that for our doctor discussion in a little bit so that we'll be able to talk medical issues with her. Let's look at some of the comments that are coming in. Craig Duff says, hello, Claudia, Anya, and Anne. So glad I tuned in for this and looking forward to reading Andrew's new book. Yes, we're selling some books. Jody says, I remember correspondence courses in the 1980s. It worked. And I agree that you had to think twice about what you wrote on paper before you mailed in your homework. Thank you, Jody, watching in Florida. We have so many people watching. Dan Loosehouse, feels like I'm again in the classroom some 2 decades later. Many thanks. Yay, Professor. Thank you for doing this. I love these comments coming in. Professor, feel free to jump in if you want to respond to any of this. Students likely appreciate the email approach, says Janet Walsh. Another thing, you're not looking into students' bedrooms as they lie in their beds, kind of discussing the topic with you. So I don't know if anyone else in the world is doing email classrooms right now, but this might be a thing. And as we know, the New York Times loves to do trend stories. It normally only takes one person to make a trend story, and that could happen here. Susan said, selection of those who converse in both seats is essential to maintaining an audience, at least for me. A great idea, and thank you for giving us this. A reminder of the book title, Downfall, The Demise of a President and His Party. Professor, was there any discussion when you pitched the book or as the marketing stuff was coming together about being so clear and so direct in the thesis that you were going to share with the world? Was there any thought of kind of hedging your bets in the marketing part of this?
Yes, there are several publishers, and my agent can certainly tell you, who said, well, we certainly hope the professor is right, correct in his prediction, but suppose he's wrong. Will our faces be red? And they were worried about their red faces. I said, no, no chance I'm wrong, but I did find a very good publisher and was very happy with them. Sree, could I take another minute just to talk about race, which
of course
I mentioned earlier. When I was writing that book, Two Nations, people said, oh, you're going to be writing about Black people and their problems. And I said, no, I'm not. Most of the book is actually about the white race in America, which is the dominant race. And this is true today, too, for the Republican Party. The Republican Party is 88% white. 88% white. The other 12%, not black, mainly Cuban Americans. The Democratic Party is only about 58%, 58% white. The rest are everything else. So the Republican, I have a chapter on the Republican Party I called A White Haven. My original title was A Caucasian Haven, but I changed it. Anyway, it's a white haven. And there's some fascinating material on white Republicans. In one survey, rather obscure one, they were asked, white Republicans, do you feel that white people are discriminated nowadays as much or indeed more than some minorities, or most minorities? And most Republicans, whites, said, yes, we whites are discriminated against more even than black people today. And wow, if they believe that, then they're carrying a lot of baggage. There's a lot of grievance, resentment, a feeling that being white doesn't count anymore. Whereas white Democrats said, no, we won't be discriminating, okay for us. And that's an important divide in the white population between white Democrats and white Republicans. And of course, Donald Trump has appealed to whites. There's just one black person in his cabinet, isn't there? It's still our neurosurgeon. And is there a single white person, black person in the White House? Not that I know of. And essentially, Trump has said, I don't need black votes. In fact, by saying that, I strengthen my white supporters.
And that is going to be one way to frame how all of this is going to play out in the weeks and months ahead. I just wanted to show the style section. We're going to look at all the weddings that are taking place, in isolation with social distancing. There's also a story here about digital hoarders corral the web. A Library of Congress archive team is right now preserving the vast ocean of online content for future generations. I tell my children, this is like World War II. People will want to know what you were doing, what you experienced, and there's a chance to share it. But I have two questions from our wonderful social cues column in the New York Times every week, Philip Gallanz. And I'm going to ask the professor I'm going to read out the question and then ask the professor what his answer might be. There's no right or wrong answer, Professor, so don't worry. The question came in. This is the etiquette column. That's not 6 feet. When my husband and I take occasional walks outdoors, he gets aggravated and snappish with oncoming pedestrians who don't move as far as possible to their side of the sidewalk as we do to maintain a safe social distance. Any advice, Professor?
Oh, yes, I'm on the husband's side. Sorry, ma'am. When I go out 3 times a day to walk the dog, no, actually, I only walk him twice a day, and and if there's somebody who's coming close to me, I just wave them away like this. Go further away. No, 6 feet is absolutely the rule. So there's, as you say, right or wrong? No, there's only one right answer to that.
All right, let's see what Philip says. You and your husband should fall into single file, move as far as possible from the thoughtless or preoccupied pedestrians and wait until they pass. If you can manage a friendly sounding, which side do you like? Go for it. But now is no time to road rage. Nasty remarks rarely bring the pleasure we expect them to. Be safe. I'll tell you about the dogs. Let's do a shout out to our dogs, Professor, because my dog, who was used to going out 3 to 4 times a day, is now going out twice a day and hasn't complained, has held it together, so to speak. So we're grateful to our pets. The other thing is my dog is keeping me alive, I believe, because I'm able to smell her wonderful aroma several times a day. That's how I know that I haven't caught corona yet. It's not a sign for sure that you have it, but if you can't smell, then you know that you're in trouble. But that's not the only sign that you're in trouble. But at least every time I get a nice whiff of her aroma, I get happy here. Claudia says, both Andrew and I are great admirers of Philip Gallanz. He's a common sense kind of advice guy. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. We also want to read the tiny love stories column because the modern love, as excellent as it is, it's always too long for this read along. The modern love column is she lost her spouse of 56 years just before the pandemic hit. Now she feels resilient, by Betty Ann Moskowitz, and a tiny love story, which I will read out loud. As our world shrinks, hers expands. Our 3-month-old decided that she no longer wants to sleep. Not forever, we hope, but for now. As new parents, we are learning, like everyone else during this pandemic, to take it one day at a time. While our worlds condense into 2-hour sleep stretches and 2,000 square feet of self-isolation, our daughter's world continues to expand. We find solace in her small wonders, her fingers tracing the lines of our faces, her delight in the guitar, our silly dancing, the range of her newfound voice. Today, there is hope in our tiny universe. We hold it fiercely. Charity Euro. What a wonderful little story and a great photo of this family. That is awesome. This is the New York Times Read Along, folks. Thank you for being here. Just want to show you the cover of the New York Times Read Along. Pro tips from Aunt Sandy. Sandra Lee, an author and a TV personality and former girlfriend of Governor Andrew Cuomo, wants to teach the homebound how to subsist on affordable staples. I've not checked this out yet, but what do you think of, first of all, I didn't know that they were former boyfriend and girlfriend. Andrew Cuomo is certainly having his moment. What do you make of the governor, the mayor of New York City? How are they going to be judged when all of this is done, Professor?
No, I think both of them, in fact, the vast majority of our governors are going to be judged very well. And by the way, those who are most active are Democrats. That's because Democrats believe in government. And we've been told so many people, government is a dirty word. Remember Ronald Reagan? I'm from the government and I'm here to help you, and said Reagan, that's the worst possible thing you could hear. Now, government does help, and it helps in all sorts of ways. It's ourselves working together. So I think our mayor, who had a bad rap in many ways, has risen to the occasion, and our governor really has shown himself to be, there's some people are saying, having kind of dreams, fantasies. Couldn't the Democratic convention just kind of, maybe Joe Biden himself would step down and Andrew Cuomo would, by acclaim, be given the nomination? Well, don't count on that.
What are the rules again, Professor? Can you remind us, so that we know? What are the options? If you said already, President Trump gets sick, then it's automatically Vice President Pence. But what is the obligation the Democratic Party has to its current nominee?
Delegates are pledged, and they're not pledged as strongly as the Electoral College members, but they are pledged. And on the first vote, they have to go for Joe Biden, and that majority will nominate him. So that's really what's going to happen. There's
no, if he for some reason, God forbid, is sick or something like that, how does that work? Are all people are what happens at that moment between now and August?
We have no precedent on that at all. We've had a vice president with what was his name? That nice young man from Missouri who had to step down as vice president. But no, we had no precedent on this, so I can't really predict on the basis of the past.
Got it. It would be wrong for us to leave the vows section of the New York Times without asking you how you met Claudia Dreyfus.
Well, therein lies a tale. We picked each other up at a book party on Riverside Drive, quite a few years ago. And we picked each other up, and on our second date, and I was really trying to impress her, I took her to Lutece. Remember Lutece of State?
I love Lutece. Oh my God. I haven't thought of it in years. It's closed, sadly. A great French restaurant in New York. Closed for years.
You can think how I wanted to impress her. So over Coquille Saint-Jacques, she said to me, we've met before. And I said, I really have no notion. I thought we just met at that party. And she said, no, we were on a panel together at Wayne State University in Detroit 20 years ago. I just don't remember that at all. Claudia forgets nothing. So I said, "You sure with Wayne State?" "Yes." It was a conference called the Urban University. She was a student leader. I was an up-and-coming assistant professor. So, being a professor, I call up Wayne State and I say to the library, "Do you have an archivist?" And they say, "Yeah, I think we do, somewhere down the third sub-basement." So they put me through the room and I say, "Do you have files on things that happened 20 years ago?" He loved the question. Nobody had ever come to him before. And his office was filled with filing cabinets. Remember those? He dug into them and he found a series of photos that were taken at that conference. And he sent me a disc with them. This that you have in front of you is one of them. That's me and my wife 1,000 years ago at Wayne State University. As you can see, we're not much of an item there. That happened later, but she was totally right. So the answer is, when did I meet Claudia? Well, I met her at a conference in Detroit years ago. And then
what a great story. And you've been together now how many years?
20 years now. And we're looking forward to another 20.
Wonderful. I'm hoping that we could somehow entice her out of the living room to come into your study and say hello just before we say goodbye. Are you a sports fan, sir? We're looking at the Sunday sports section. This is a reminiscence about Tiger winning the Masters last year. Was a great day, great sports day. And it says, for one day, everyone is a golf fan. The NBA's future may look like Taiwan, and it's pretty empty. And we don't hear as much about what's happening in Taiwan as we do about other countries in East Asia, but they've done a pretty good job themselves of holding things together. Here's the sports section. They still have a sports section. They're able to produce it. And this is a credit to the reporters and editors of the New York Times that they're able to produce these all while so many people are working from home. Jeremiah says, "So glad I tuned into this instead of the Sunday morning talk shows that are always going too much equal time to Trump enablers." Thanks, Claudia Dreyfus. Wait, Claudia, we missed that shot.
Okay.
There you are. Awesome. Neil, can we get the other shot back up of the two of them?
Okay, two's enough for the moment.
Okay, there you go. 1 second. We're going to hold that, and we're going to try and pull up the other photograph that we have of the two of you a few years earlier.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can.
That's
Yeah, there we go.
67.
I fudged that.
You did capably, but the truth is, it's in the middle of an earlier century.
You both look great. Thank you, Claudia, for helping us get Andrew on the show. As you pointed out, he's not going a lot out nowadays. Anyway, he's got the two dog walks, so we squeeze this in between the two dog walks. So thank you.
One I get.
Claudia, how are you? Claudia, how are you doing?
Disappeared into the wilds of Brooklyn. So,
Yes.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. On the sports section, my only sport was I was a varsity swimmer once. I did a mean butterfly. But at this point, I read the sports section mainly for the scandals. You know, what's latest in the payoffs at FIFA.
So that's right. Those stories are always interesting. Okay, so we just want to say to everyone who's watching to please stay tuned. We're going to bring in a couple of minutes Dr. Lisa Ganjhu, who's a fantastic doctor who will answer all your medical questions and help us read this story about life and death, the life and death shift in Italy, about what's happening on the front lines. She herself is on the front lines at NYU Langone. We're so grateful to her. Professor Hacker, before you leave us, I want to ask you to talk for a few minutes about what people should be thinking of this election cycle. What are the clues to what's going to happen? What are the things that they should watch out for in the news and in the president's behavior that could impact the way things are? And is there anything that you believe that could save his presidency and save his election?
Okay, let's take the last first. No, he can't say this election because he doesn't have the votes to carry the Electoral College anymore. He lucked in with that once. It's not going to happen again. As I said, those 3 states, 1.2 million Democratic majority in those 3 states, and that's going to happen again. My suggestion would be play it cool in the election. I wouldn't worry about positions that Biden takes or tensions between Biden and Sanders fans, things like that. There's going to be a lot of, we have a 24/7 news cycle. They have to think of things to fill the air. It's going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. Biden is a bystander. And by the way, I have a feeling that a lot of Democrats are going to come out and do his work for him. I have a hunch that Adam Schiff is going to be seen all over the place because he's a very persuasive person. I think Andrew Cuomo is going to be seen all over the place. His vice president, whoever it is, will. And so it's going to be an interesting campaign. But as I keep saying, the result is already ordained.
Professor, I'm not as certain as you because I may be more fatalistic and think that bad news always happens, and so we're going to find out. I've been thinking that this is going to be the most consequential vice presidential pick in history. Would you agree with that?
No, vice presidents have no effect at all. Pence had no effect for Trump. And certainly, does anyone remember Hillary's vice president? Senator from Virginia. You do, but who else does?
No, but what about this time, Professor? This time, because people are also thinking about how long a Biden presidency could last and the importance of minorities and women and all of those issues, do you think that this will matter this time?
It's an important point you mentioned. I'm not sure voters really think about the mortality of the president. Last time a woman was on the ticket, we remember who she was, and she certainly didn't help John McCain at all. So I'm going to keep my options open on this one.
Thank you. And Jody says this discussion has brought a lot of hope back to me. Thank you, Professor Hacker. And we have so many great comments, people speaking, writing so many great things. One of the best New York Times read-along, and that's saying something. 5 years of the read-along, and Laura's been around for a lot of that. Thanks to everyone involved. And we're not done because we've got another extended portion of the show where we're going to say hello to a great doctor. John says, love hearing Andrew's confidence that this election result is headed away from Trump. Music to our ears, gives us hope. I will say to everybody, even though the professor is this confident, that we don't know for sure. He knows, but we don't. And we all need to get his book, Downfall, the Demise of a President and His Party. And one thing I will say, Professor, is that after the 2012 elections, it was declared that the Republican Party was dead and that they wouldn't, for a generation, there wouldn't be another Republican president because of the minorities coming out to vote, the young people coming out to vote, et cetera, et cetera. And that didn't happen the way it did. So that's where I get my skepticism, my journalistic skepticism, because I worked on an effort to just get young people to vote. It didn't matter which party. And a lot of them did all the right things, said all the right things, but on voting day, they didn't show up the way they could have or should have.
No, you're right on that. And we have believe me, as a college professor, I see these young people, all the time. They're not that political. They're moral in their positions, but they're not that political. They're not that engaged. There are so many other things going on in their lives. You can't count on the youth vote for Biden to win. He's going to win, with a middle-aged electorate. I have a couple of figures in the book. The median age of Republicans is about 57, and the median age of Democrats is about 53. So both are middle-aged parties, and it's going to be between those two constituencies. And in this case, who I said was going to win.
Thank you. Chetna says, thank you for putting this together. I'll definitely buy the book. So we love hearing that. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for supporting Professor Hacker. We're going to say goodbye to the professor, but not end the show, because we've got Professor Lisa Ganjhu standing by, who is a frontline worker on behalf of her community, on behalf of her city, on behalf of her country, on behalf of the world. And we're so grateful to her for being here. Professor Hacker, any final thoughts, any wisdom you would leave us with as we say goodbye?
No, let's make a deal. Have me back after the election. And
Yes, we will. We will definitely do that. Thank you, Professor. Goodbye.
bye-bye.
All right. Let's now tell you about our next week's guest. We are just so excited to bring you a fabulous guest for next week. You are going to love this. 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. Eastern time next week. We will, of course, have another doctor with us, but we are pleased to announce who our next guest is going to be. Neil has got that ready for us. Neil is going to step into the host shoes, and I'm going to step into the executive producer shoes to produce his guest next week.
I think before we do that, Sree, I still may need to do a training session with you just to make sure that you get everything right on the back end. But I am excited about next week's guest. As Sree mentioned, I will be guest hosting on April 19th, and our guest, as we mentioned in the ticker earlier, is going to be Judge Rosemary Aquilina. This is the April 19th show at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're familiar with her name, she is the judge who presided over the 2018 USA Gymnastics sex abuse scandal and sentenced a very evil man, who I try not to name if I can, to up to 175 years in prison. And one of the things that she did that really stood out is she let all of the women who were abused by that man have their say in court. They spoke and told their stories, and it was incredibly moving and incredibly powerful. So we're looking forward to a great show with her. She, in addition to being a sitting judge, she's also an author, and she also has some interesting thoughts in terms of the judicial process and how that's been impacted by COVID-19. How do you do a jury trial when you need to have 6 feet separation, et cetera? So we're looking forward to that, and I'll be joining the show next week.
Yeah, and that's going to be fantastic. This is what we call a great get in the news business. All our guests are great gets, but this is a timely, important topic. This is also the month where there's a lot of extra awareness placed on sexual assault and
awareness month.
Yeah, and so I'm so glad we are doing this. Thank you to the judge for joining us. She's also an author. So we'll have lots of people from around the world watching and tuning in for that. We did a show with the great Abigail Pesta, who wrote a book about the girls who were abused by, I'm going to say his name, Larry Nasser, the doctor who abused the gymnasts at Michigan State, and Abby's read along, which was fantastic and really important stuff. We are going to make sure that you can go into the archives and find that read along. If you search my name and the read along and her name, you'll find it on Twitter, etc. But the reason we want to remind everybody is that this is a great way to have your friends and family who don't engage with the news, young people in your lives, invite them, please. Tell them Sundays, 8:30 to 10:30. Join us. It's recorded. It's Eastern time, 8:30 to 10:30, but it's recorded so they can always watch later. And we'll have a physician, a doctor with us to answer your medical questions. And we want to ask all of you to please give us feedback. Please suggest speakers for both the read along on Sunday mornings, the daily COVID-19 shows I do 31 straight days, 9 p.m. Eastern tonight is our positivity show every Sunday night. And also my WBAI 2 hours every Saturday, noon to 2 Eastern on WBAI FM progressive radio station here in New York City, but you can listen anywhere in the world on WBAI. We're looking for guests, suggestions, sponsors, ideas. Please write to us, Sree@Sree.net, Neil@NeilParekh.org. Rose Horowitz, who's live tweeting a lot of the things we do, says, fantastic guest. Follow her at Rose Horowitz 31. Let's do a shout out to our sponsors, and then let's bring that doctor in.
Before that, I also want to just do a quick shout out. You mentioned Abigail Pesta. She'll be joining us on the show briefly next week. But I also want to thank Michelle Raphael, a colleague of ours from California, who is also close with Judge Aquilina and was instrumental in helping us get her on the show. So Abigail and Michelle, thank you very much. It's an important conversation and an important guest, and we couldn't do it without you. So Sree mentioned we do want to thank our sponsors again. It is an extreme honor to have the confidence that people place in our work, that they're willing to sponsor the show. This is after 5 years of work by Sree. I've been working with him for about 2.5 years now as the executive producer of the Read Along. So again, Ron Thomas, thank you for your sponsorship from Strategy Focus Group. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, thank you for your sponsorship as well. Muckrack helps you discover news as it breaks, easily generate reports, and explore the work of journalists, podcasters, bloggers, and more. Muckrack software helps PR teams build stronger relationships with the media. And if you're a journalist, you might also be eligible for their free tools to identify trends and showcase your work. And final thank you to Samir Albatran from TweepsMap. TweepsMap helps you build personalized relationships with your audience, focused, straightforward, actionable analytics, and an all-in-one intelligent publishing platform. Thank you again to Strategy Focus Group, Muckrack, and TweepsMap for your support of the New York Times Read Along. And as Sree mentioned, if you're interested in supporting the New York Times Read Along, the great conversations that we have every week, the great guests that we have, please feel free to email me, neil@neilparekh.org. And in honor of Muckrack, we certainly want to show off Shree's Muckrack mug. And Sree, you have a larger relationship with Muckrack as well, right? You're doing other projects with them?
That's right. I'm now an advisor to Muckrack, and we're going to show you the links so that you can support each of the sponsors. They can track that their viewers are coming from the show right there. You see on the screen, readalong.link/strategy focus group, readalong.link/muckrack, and readalong.link/tweepsmap. Tweepsmap, the P is in there. And by the way, I want to say to both Ron Thomas and Samir, who are from our other sponsors, I need a mug. I need some kind of tchotchke so that I can hold this up. Otherwise, Muckrack's getting too much love compared to you all. So please do send that along. Mark says, looking forward to having Ron on his podcast on the 20th and Stefan on the 27th. Rose Horowitz, thanks, Michelle Raphael and Abigail Pesta. And then Stefan thanks our 3 sponsors. That is really cool that we're having this global conversation. So I think we are ready to meet our Dr. Lisa Ganjhu, who is who's with NYU Langone, and she's going to be coming on the screen in a minute. I should tell you folks that she was a guest on my radio show yesterday, my spin-off radio show to my daily calls on WBAI 99.5 FM, Saturdays, noon to 2. And she was just fantastic in answering questions, keeping people calm, helping them understand the crisis. So here's your chance. If you have a question, please ask. Please ask us now. Anything to do with the medical field. Like everyone, she doesn't have all the answers. No one has all the answers. Dr. Fauci doesn't have all the answers. But it is wonderful to have a medical professional who can help us. And one of the things that people have said to me, because I've had 12 doctors on my daily calls in the last 31 days, is that they see doctors on TV all the time, including our friend Sanjay Gupta and Dr. Lippy Roy and others, but they don't get to have that interaction that you're about to have. So please tag your friends. Please hit share right now. There are friends waking up on the West Coast. Tag them. so that they can watch this and they can get some information, so that we're not getting our information just from television or just from fake WhatsApp forwards. So let's bring on Dr. Lisa Ganjhu. Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Good morning. Hi.
How
good
are
morning.
you, Doctor?
Hi. How's everyone's
Great.
morning going?
Great to see you. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you on the screen because you were on my radio show, and of course there was no video to go with it. But I'm so glad to see you. I was worried that you weren't getting enough sleep because you were answering questions late to me, and then you were coming in early and answering emails again. So tell us how you are. Tell us where you are. Tell us what's happening, please.
So thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yep, great. Okay, perfect. So, we're trying our best to do as much as we can in the hospital. It's a crazy virus, and it's such an unpredictable course. So it's quite challenging. It's honestly quite challenging.
Yeah, and we should tell people that you're on Twitter so they can find you. Dr. Lisa Ganjhu is your Twitter handle, so that they can find you. Dr. Lisa Ganjhu. Tell us about where you work and how long you've been there, a little bit of biography. And I know you're very modest, but please don't be.
Sure. So I'm a gastroenterologist and a hepatologist at NYU Langone Health. I've been there for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was at another hospital here in the city. Again, been in academic practice for almost 20 years. Gastroenterology and hepatology, nutrition, obesity has really been my focus. But now with the COVID-19 crisis, we're pretty much all hands on deck, and we're all repurposing ourselves into intensivists and trying really to fight the battle. And as I said, it's been challenging and hard. A lot of hard work. A lot of people are doing their best to battle against this terrible virus. But again, there's a lot of research that's going on, a lot of trials, a lot of on-the-fly trials that we're all trying to do. We've got some great minds putting their heads together and trying to find a way of managing this.
Yes, and we appreciate so much you and all the doctors. Look at the cover of the New York Times Magazine. I don't know if you probably haven't had a chance to read it or anything, but it says on the front lines in northern Italy, the life and death shift of a doctor, photographs by Andrea Frazetta and text by Jason Horowitz. When you see this photograph, what does it tell you? What does it remind you of? Who are the folks that you think of?
The picture looks like a soldier. They look like completely exhausted soldiers that are working their hardest to try to fight the battle.
Yeah, so Doc, we're going to show you the New York Times Magazine always puts out a really nice video about how they put the magazine cover together. So we're going to show you that, and we're going to listen in. Neil's just queuing that up, and let's play that.
From the New York Times Magazine, this is Behind the Cover.
Our cover story this week is a series of photographic portraits of healthcare workers who have been on the front lines of the staggering COVID-19 outbreak in northern Italy.
The photographer Andrea Frazetta has had a long relationship with the magazine and came to Kathy Ryan, our photo director, with an idea to photograph hospital workers in Brescia, Bergamo, and Milan.
He photographed a lot of these doctors and nurses and support staff at the ends of their shifts, capturing a moment where the wear and tear, the fatigue of this incredibly traumatic experience would be really evident on their faces.
He only had a short time with each healthcare worker, photographing them standing 6 feet away, wearing goggles and gloves. It's remarkable the portraits he was able to make with those constraints.
One of the pictures that most powerfully exemplified all of this was this portrait of Monica Falocchi. a head ICU nurse at a hospital in Brescia.
She's looking you straight in the eyes, and her expression has a shell-shocked quality to it, almost like somebody who's been through a war.
While Andrea was taking these portraits, the story took a tragic turn. His parents became sick with COVID-19, and within a few days, they ended up in the hospital in Milan. On March 26th, as we were putting this whole series of photographs together, Andrea's mother passed away. We've known Andrea for years and worked with him on many other projects, and our hearts were just really broken by that.
He was gracious enough to allow us to publish the last photo he took of his mother as he stood outside her window, talking to her after delivering her groceries. It's an incredibly moving picture.
Andrea said that we were living through history right now, and that his mother would want him to share what his family had been through to help people understand how serious this is.
Wow. Doctor, what do you think of that?
The emotion of the subjects in the pictures. It's quite kind of breathtaking just to see the pictures. They're just so raw, and a lot of what we see in the emergency room, in the ICU, in the triage area, of trying their hardest to really help fight the battle. And as I said, they just look like soldiers, just worn out soldiers that have just given their all. And the fact that they got it after the last shift or at the end of their shift is their 12-hour, most of these are 12-hour shifts. That they go to their hotels or their homes. They quarantine themselves off from other people, so there's no real emotional downtime. And they start right up again 12 hours later.
And I know you went through that yourself. And here's that photograph of Andrea, the photographer, Andrea's mother, Anna Maria Mentuni, photographed by her son in March. What a picture, what a story, and so sad. This is the New York Times Magazine, and it's devastating to see and read that. Doctor, I want to just salute all your staff and your colleagues. You're doing amazing work. How do you find the strength to do this when things are falling apart? And your work, let's be fair, is not in the intensive care, right? It's not in the emergency room traditionally. So how have you retrained yourself? How have you found the strength? Has your family been extra worried about you? There's a joke in the on one of the on the Indian community, Facebook communities called subtle curry traits, where they said for the first time ever, Indian parents are worried that their children became doctors because otherwise they always want their kids to become doctors. And now they're saying, oh my God, I wish my kid wasn't a doctor. So just talk about that a little bit, please.
Sure. Yeah, so full disclosure, I'm not in the intensive care. I was not in the intensive care unit, nor was I in the emergency room. We were kind of in between. So basically patients would get admitted to the hospital and then they would come to this floor to kind of declare themselves. So either they did well and were okay without being on a respirator versus some of them actually needed to be ventilated and put on a ventilation unit and then would go to the intensive care unit. Our hospital did a great job kind of training us as far as giving us all the information, helped us kind of retrain our skills a little bit. But honestly, all those skills were kind of put there through medical school, through our training. We've all trained in high intensity. Most of us that are comfortable there have trained in an intensive care unit at some point of their career. And it's interesting, we would always say we'll never probably use this in our lifetime. And unfortunately, we are using all those skills in our lifetime now. I never imagined in my life that I would be in a situation like this. But I feel like my contribution, as little or as much as it is best as I can do. As far as my family goes, so I live in New York by myself, but my dad lives upstate, and I haven't been able to see him in a couple weeks. So we've been FaceTiming, and he would tell stories about when he was a medical student and working in the cholera epidemics and pandemics. And I jokingly said, well, this is apparently my cholera that I'm dealing in such a pandemic situation where you're just doing your best with what limited resources you have, which is what he had in India. But thankfully, we do have resources. But again, we're not battling a common disorder. We're battling a virus that we're still not understanding the science behind it. And it's actually affecting every single organ system. And it's not just the pulmonary, just the respirations or just their breathing. It's their kidneys, it's their heart, it's their liver. It's just very unpredictable and quite stressful to try to manage these patients. And again, every day is learning and every day is something new and everyone's trying to find something new.
Thank you, Doc. We have about 15 minutes with you. We've got questions for you, so we're going to ask them to you. Ellen says, I stopped the delivery of the New York Times Daily and now read it online. I'm afraid of bringing in the virus on the paper. Any slim chance is enough for digital reading? We had questions on the WBAI show yesterday when you were a guest where people asked about this. What do you say to them about all of this?
Well, again, the virus can live on cardboard for up to 24 hours. So, I would say read it digitally just because you're able to read it digitally. If you do have the paper version or if you handle your mail, always wash your hands before you eat, before you touch your eyes, touch your face. Meaning our hands are basically our vectors to get this from the virus to our portals of entry for infection. So don't turn the page after you lick your finger. That would be one way of protecting yourself. But again, washing your hands is definitely important. And, I think some places are not even handling money and they want you to use your credit card and touchless kind of system. So I would say err on the side of it potentially being an infectious source and just make sure you wash your hands.
Thank you, Doctor. Wash those hands, right? We keep saying. Let's get some more questions in. We're talking to Dr. Lisa Ganjhu of NYU Langone. Question from Janet. Do you see more or less students going into medical school due to the pandemic? We'll give you a chance to think about that for a second. I can tell you that whenever such crises have happened traditionally, where journalism is involved, more journalists people go to journalism school, partly because for grad school, sometimes it's seen as a safe harbor when the economy is bad, but also people are driven to go tell stories, as we've seen in the Trump presidency, as we've seen in Watergate, things like that. So the question is, medical school, will people be more inspired to go to medical school after this?
Well, that's actually a very interesting question because just like what you were saying, Sree, when the economy is at its lowest, we tend to have people go into graduate school because at least there's some safe harbor for a couple of years. As far as medicine goes, it's an interesting if this is going to drive people into into medical school or some in the healthcare field. I think it's going to basically people will filter out. I think if they in their heart of hearts want to be a healthcare provider, this will be their drive. They may be volunteering now to get a better sense of what healthcare is like right now. I'd love to see more people go into healthcare that are dedicated and hardworking and really just want to help out and learn more. It's not an easy battle for sure, no matter which end of medicine you want to go into, whether it's allied health versus medical school, nursing school, whatever have you. But I'd like to think the dedicated will push through and do this. Perhaps people will think twice about it if they don't want to put their bodies or their families at risk. They may opt not to go into healthcare. But again, this is just such a rare instance that we're all just doing our best to help everyone involved. And I think there's almost every country except for Antarctica that's affected by this. I'd love to see more people go into medicine.
Sure. We also want to do a shout out to nurses in particular, because it turns out I've discovered trying to book nurses for these kinds of things is really hard because hospitals are very careful about who gets to speak.
and nurses are very busy, of course, but they also don't have much opportunity to give them kind of media training, things like that. There are also a lot of doctors who are in private practice, so they're their own bosses, so they can say whatever they want. There isn't that same kind of facility for private nurses who run their own businesses and can do this kind of thing. So I'd like you to speak a little bit, not just about the nurses, but also who else is in that ER, that hospital right now that we should be so grateful for.
Give a shout out to everyone in the hospital, and we're not just talking about the physicians. We actually have, I think our nurses are amazing because they do provide a lot of the nurturing, a lot of the caring for the patients. But then, you know, we also need to put a shout out to all the service and the environmental folks that are helping the hospital run. We're talking about people that are supplying all the supplies to the floors, people who are cleaning the floors, people who are helping to take care of the nurses, taking care of the patients, what the nurses can't do, like feeding the patients or getting the food to the patients, helping to clean them, helping to care for them, the patient assistant techs. As I said, the environmental custodial staff, the kitchen staff, both for the patients and for the healthcare workers. Again, the supply chain of care is quite vast. We need to also include the MTA and people who are driving us back and forth from home to the hospital, people who are feeding us outside the hospital. I mean, there's no paucity of people that are contributing, and you may not think that you're contributing, but even by just sitting on your couch and not exposing yourself to other people, contribute to the care of patients with COVID infection. So it's hard to say. I'd say that there's no one to thank, honestly. It's just everyone's involved in the care of the COVID patient right now.
Thank you, doctor, and thank you to all of them. We have a few minutes left. We want to get as many questions as we can, so let's get them in there. Is there anything that makes a person more susceptible to the virus?
So that's an interesting question, because there was some talk about certain ethnic groups that are more susceptible to the infection. I think anyone who's exposed to the virus has a risk for acquiring the infection. Now, you may have the infection, but you may or may not have a terrible clinical course. As we know, 80% of the patients or people that get infected with COVID infection have very mild symptoms, and it's only the 20% that do poorly. What we do know is that people who have high exposure, have other medical problems such as obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, pulmonary disease, asthma, all of those general medicine type problems are more susceptible to more complicated courses. And I think, there's certain populations that may have those diseases at an increased rate, but they may also be more exposed because they're in tighter quarters, they're using mass transportation, they're just in larger groups of people, may be more exposed to the virus itself. I think just keeping a good health is really important. Try not to get diabetes, high blood pressure. Try not to be obese. Really just taking good care of your health is really going to protect you from the bad outcomes. But even that is really kind of unpredictable, honestly. I mean, we've heard stories of young people who are athletic or very fit can really be pushed down to the ground with this virus. So we can do only our best, but what can I say? We're all in a very unpredictable state of affairs, and that's what makes us kind of scared of what's going on.
Thank you. Linda is quoting you, and she says, even by just sitting on your couch and not exposing yourself, you're contributing, says Dr. Lisa Ganjhu. By the way, the doctor is available on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find her at Dr. Lisa Ganjhu, all one word, DRLISA. There, you're seeing it on your screen right now, GANJHU. Talk about your own story. How did you decide to become a medical professional? Was it a straight line, or did you deviate?
As any good Indian girl would say, I barreled through, basically. I am third generation doctor. My grandfather father was a physician in India. My dad trained in India and works in upstate New York, and still practicing. And then there's me, and I basically went through from college to medical school to residency to fellowship. I did an extra fellowship in liver diseases, and I really stayed in academic medicine my whole career. Prior to being part of NYU, I was part of Columbia University as one of their faculty staff as well. I'm at St. Luke's Roosevelt, which is now part of Sinai. But yeah, so my whole career has been academic medicine, more on the clinical side, but I do help to train fellows and medical residents, obviously in gastroenterology and hepatology. But yeah, no, my practice itself has changed quite a bit from, as I said, I ended my training doing transplant liver or hepatology, and have now progressed over the last 20 years to try to do more preventative medicine, because sick people are very hard to take care of. Obviously, I wish I could try to turn back the clock in a lot of my very sick patients of where in their lifetime could they have maybe made some different lifestyle choices so they didn't get to that point. And yeah, so I'm doing more diet, nutrition, obviously general gastroenterology, endoscopies, hepatitis A, B, C. That's kind of my day-to-day work. And my passion is a lot of nutrition now, just because I think food does play a large part of gastrointestinal disorders. So my path has kind of been a little bit circuitous, and it's still going to be circuitous. And it's really based on my patient population. They're the ones that kind of mold me into the type of physician that I actually am.
Thank you. So shout out to our patients as well. Doctor, you just heard that ambulance go by.
Yes.
New York City has always been famous for its sirens, but there's something different going on now. I have not heard so many sirens. We're all both in the same city, so I didn't hear that siren because I think you're further downtown. I'm on the Upper West Side. But talk about that. How do you feel? How do you react? Do you even notice them anymore? I know that before all of this, every time I saw a fire truck go by with the sirens, I would say a quiet prayer, just thanking them. That started after 9/11 that I started doing that, just becoming more aware of those folks who are going into the battle. But now this is a different kind of soundtrack to our wonderful city.
Well, it might be a little south of you, so you may get the ambulance in a couple of minutes. Yeah, honestly, I think we're so used to listening to ambulances, and even when I was in training, you kind of got a sense of what was going on with the ambulances. And honestly, the other day, I heard an ambulance, and it was one of those slow sirens, and my heart just sank, because that usually means that someone has passed, because it's a slow siren as opposed to a fast siren. And it just kind of brought home that, yes, some people are really just not making it. Or, yeah, no, I mean, I think sirens seem to be the only noise that I'm hearing, because you're not hearing people walking or laughing on the streets anymore, because they're social distancing and they're not going out and about. We're not hearing all the other cars and the trucks or anything. So in the morning when you wake up, it's silence, and I'm not used to it, being in New York for almost 20 years. But it's a sign of the times that everyone's just quiet, and we're all on the same page of, doing our due diligence of just being and going to work to do the work, or staying home so we don't expose everyone else. I'd like to think people are spending more family time together in a positive way. I know it can be challenging for some people. But I think, as I said yesterday, I'm tending to connect with more of my friends through video chats, through FaceTime or Zoom or whatever we have, depending on how many people we can get together. And it all comes down to being happy of who you have in your life, and feeling blessed to who you have in your life, and thankful. I think there is a moment of pause that we have. Because we're not busy going to work, we're not busy doing our usual tasks that keep us from maintaining relationships. And I think this is the time to do that. And I think by hearing these stories of patients passing and families dying by themselves in the intensive care unit or in the hospital, 'cause I don't know if most people know this, that there are no visitors in the hospital. When patients leave their families in the emergency room and they're taken up to be taken care of by the doctors, that's the last they see them until they're discharged. So you can only imagine how these people feel, that they're scared, is most vulnerable, and they don't have their family around with them. We have nurses and patient care techs that are with them and providing help. We just had the Jewish holiday with Passover. We had a patient that was in the unit, and one of the nurses had to pull up the prayer on her phone and did the prayer with him in the room with him, with the rooms all kind of in isolation. But that's what our nurses are doing out there. They're being family members and helping patients heal through all of this. I try to encourage family to FaceTime with their patients, with their family members, but it's really hard because they just don't have the strength to do it either. So as I said, it's a big, huge shout out to our nurses that are surrogate family for a lot of these sick folks too.
Doc, we're going to bring in a minute a video from Nick Kristof, our friend who has inspired so many people in the way he covers journalism and covers our country. He got into a couple of hospitals and is going to we have a video that we're going to show you. But before that, I want to ask you, and for folks, if you're watching, tag your friends right now. There's a great chance for them to watch live and also the recording after we wind up. This will be able to watch the recording right now on all these platforms, including YouTube. But I want to say to you that yesterday we had on our daily COVID-19 call, we had Monisha Koirala, the great Bollywood actress, who wrote a book about being healed after her cancer. And she had come out to America, to New York, to Sloan Kettering, to get her medical treatment, as thousands of people do from around the world. The medical system is seen as the best in the world, and people, prime ministers, kings, presidents, actresses come to America, come to New York. What has this shown us about our system? Even as we salute the brave doctors and the brave nurses, how did we end up in this position where New York City has more deaths than almost any other country except America? How did we end up here? What does this say? What does it say for the next person in another country who can afford to come here? Will they do it? Will this change America? Will this, Bernie Sanders has dropped out. Will this change how we approach things like Medicare for all? Please talk about that.
That's a hot topic, definitely, and it's interesting. We honestly don't know which way it's going to go. At this point, all we know is it's all hands on deck, and we're trying to fight the battle. And its cost is not an issue right now. We just need to try to get through this. It's an interesting conversation to have as far as like who's going to own healthcare. I mean, definitely we need to change. We need to figure out a plan, and I don't know if anyone has the ideal plan. I think people who come from different countries to come to the United States for healthcare or come to New York for healthcare, it's because they're coming here because we're supposedly the bank of knowledge, and we have a group of very hardworking people that are working their hardest to make change in healthcare. There's several different cities that have similar setups with different universities and all of that, but I think New York, just by nature of its centrality, people just kind of come here as opposed to going to other centers. Again, we have some great institutions, some great physicians, but the bottom line is, we still need to take care of our own here as well. And, healthcare the way it is broken, which we do know. But I don't know if anyone knows any solutions. I haven't heard anyone that has a great solution, honestly. I feel like it doesn't have to be this confusing, but again, I'm probably not the right person to ask that question. Someone who's probably more of an administrator would probably understand the finances behind it, because it all boils down to they've made medicine a business, which is where medicine has gone wrong, because I feel like sometimes we've sold out. But yeah, it's a complicated question, and I wish I had more backstory knowledge to answer that question, except I'm really a frontline practicing physician who really just wants to take care of her patients and have to jump through hoops with insurance companies and pharmacies and all that stuff to get my patients care. But again, yeah, it shouldn't be this complicated, but I wish I could answer that, but sorry. Oh, I can't hear you. Sree, I can't hear you. I can't.
Sorry about that, Lisa. We just need to have Sree maybe log out and log back in. But again, thank you for joining.
I can't hear you guys.
There we go. We got Sree back.
Now I can. Yeah.
Lisa, we just need to have Sree maybe log out and log back in. But again, thank you for joining.
I can't hear you.
Lisa, we just need to.
Oh, hello.
Sorry about that, Lisa. I'm gonna step in here, and I think Sree might be playing the broadcast on a different device, or someone might be.
No, but
oh,
so you hear me now. Hi, sorry about that. This is fun with technology, folks. But I want to say that my father, who's watching in Kerala in India, hi, Dad. Happy Easter in Kerala. Easter is a big festival and a holiday, and I'm wearing your shirt. I want to tell my dad the shirt that he bought and he left behind, and so I'm wearing that now. And thinking of you and my mom and all our families all over the world. And my dad said, Lisa, that even after the crisis is over, people who can afford it will go to the U.S. for treatment. So there you have a vote of confidence from someone in India who has seen, by the way, even his one of the prime ministers he worked for would come for heart treatment to the United States. And we got to meet that doctor and how routine it was for the wealthy, those who could afford it, to come to the United States. So we have a video we want to play right now from Nick Kristof, who's gotten inside hospitals and gotten access that no one else is getting. And we're going to play that video for you right now, and would like your response as we watch it. Everybody, you need to see this. Here it comes.
Stretchers, row after row. Comatose patients in isolation rooms. Every surface is dangerous, and so is the air, especially during an intubation.
Every day you're thinking, am I going to get really sick? Am I going to be able to recover? Am I going to be one of those young people that, for whatever reason, dies from it?
The history of this pandemic will be remembered not for briefings at the White House, but for the heartache in the hot zone. We journalists haven't been able to cover coronavirus the way we normally cover wars from the front lines.
Good morning.
But I was able to spend 2 days inside 2 hard-hit hospitals in the Bronx to witness the toll on frontline workers trying to keep Americans alive. So we're entering a COVID area, and so everybody who goes in wears these protective gowns, and this gentleman is helping me get it on correctly, because I don't know what I'm doing.
PE monitor.
They're pulling out another one. Find that patient now. We need the patient to go upstairs, please.
Dr. Deborah White reminds me of a general commanding a battlefield.
I mean, this is what we train for. This is the moment in our career, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
She's trying to save lives.
Yeah, from upstairs.
While also keeping up morale. On this day, almost 800 New Yorkers died. Many of the people here are clearly in their 70s or 80s, but they're also Yeah, I'm struck that there are a lot of young and middle-aged adults here.
Yes, absolutely. We range from 26 all the way up to like 59.
She's constantly counting beds, keeping track of every patient.
So we're just rounding, want to know how you're feeling. And sometimes, that human interaction helps them. So the bus is here? Oh, so let's go upstairs quickly because the Me Too bus is here. Let's walk rapidly. Okay.
Dr. White has a problem. Too many patients, not enough beds. Unless they make room, more people will die.
This is a medical evacuation bus to take people from this hospital to make some space here. The bus is unlike any bus you've ever seen. It has oxygen. It has EMT people there to support the patients as they make that ride.
But as this bus frantically shuttles overflow to a nearby hospital, new patients continue to pour in. The red phone rings constantly, signaling the arrival of yet another critical patient. So many that there is a traffic jam of stretchers, leading to a small army of doctors and nurses. They are about to attempt a last desperate step, an intubation.
I need a vent. I need a vent.
I need a ventilator. Adam, there's a ventilator. So what we're going to do is intubate her right now to support her oxygen level so that we can improve the oxygen exchange.
This procedure skews.
Doctor, your thoughts on what you're hearing?
Leaving staff at enormous risk as they try to save the patient's life.
It's pretty accurate of what goes on in the emergency room, especially in some of the outlier with out of Manhattan itself. I think like Elmhurst and Montefiore have really seen a larger brunt of acuity as far as the numbers, I think. Although, all the other hospitals are seeing this as well. But as I said, it's a lot of quick thinking and just getting in there, making sure you have your PPEs all, in place, because one deterrent from there, you take it off wrong or you don't have it on correctly, exposes you. So you have that stress that you have to protect yourself, but the acuity and the urgency of making sure you have to take care of your patients as well. And as you can see, the nurses and the doctors are really just covered up completely to really protect themselves. And it's interesting how many of them have their own equipment. It seems like they're wearing ski goggles or scuba goggles or anything they can to protect their eyes. And they have the face shields, and then they have their N95s, and then they have another surgical mask on top, gowns, all of those protective gear in order to take care of the patients. But yeah, no, I mean, this is what we have to do when we go in to see patients in the emergency room. There's so much of it, and there's so much body exposure or body fluid exposure that it just it gets quite dangerous. And then of course things happen when people are rushed, so you have to make sure you think clearly when you're managing these things.
Thank you, doctor. I just wanted to say that for those of you who don't hang out in the fringe right-wing websites and things, that there's an entire conspiracy theory that this is all made up, that the people who support President Trump are saying that the hospitals, look how quiet they are. How come we're not seeing inside the hospital room? This is all made up. And that's why we need to be able to see things like this so people can see that this is real, the crisis is real, the problems are real. And that's why I'm so glad our friend Nick Kristof was able to get in and participate in this. And this shows the value of journalists and journalism, and a hospital that allowed him to do this, because not all hospitals will do this. So again, a salute to you and to all your colleagues in the industry, in the profession, who have made such a difference. Do you get a chance to step outside when the 7 o'clock cheers happen in New York City?
While I was in the hospital, I tended to miss that 7 o'clock cheering because I was giving sign out, I was giving sign out to the people that were taking the evening 12-hour shift. But now that I'm home on my off time, I do hear it from my apartment, and it's quite heartwarming. I have to say, that everyone in the city for 5 minutes is really just showing their gratitude. And it's just remarkable. And if I look out my window, I see a family, the husband and wife and a small child, and they're just, shaking the rattle, and they're screaming and clapping. And then I see other people from their windows. It's a community of all shared gratefulness of everyone, as they said in the hospital, not just the doctors and the nurses, but everyone. All the healthcare providers, the firemen, the first responders, the policemen, all of those people are part of and should enjoy that mark of gratitude.
Thank you, Doc. Janet says, I hear the conspiracy theories in the grocery store, and Paula has already posted a link to a conspiracy theories article in the New York Times. And Carol King says, thank you, Dr. Ganju, from LinkedIn. So you're being seen on all the platforms, but you're really active on Instagram and Twitter. Dr. Lisa Ganjhu. There you see her her handles on the screen. Doc, we could keep talking, but we need to let you get some rest. We need to let our producers go and get start their Sundays. We are so grateful, Doc. Thank you. We are looking to have a doctor every Sunday as long as the crisis is going on. So we hope you'll recommend us to your friends as being a friendly audience and an audience worth talking to. You've been with me twice in 2 days on my WBAI show and this. And then I have to try and see if I can get the trifecta and get you on to our daily COVID-19 call. Maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll trouble you for that. Chetna says, happy Easter to all who celebrate. Thank you, Doctor. So many comments are coming in. We're so grateful. I want to let you get on with your day. Any final words for us for now?
It's always a pleasure working with you. This has just been wonderful. And I'm glad we were able to get the word out and squash any conspiracy theories out there that this is real. Those numbers are real. And thankfully, some of them are getting better. It's always a little reassuring. Just even having a couple less than what we had the day before is always helpful. And again, thank you for having me. And I do look forward to working with you again anytime soon.
Thank you, Lisa. And Jonathan.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Yeah, and Jonathan, by the way, is in the East Village, and he says, brilliant and moving program, great show. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye. Folks, she was terrific and so calm and collected in the middle of everything that's going on. I know I wouldn't have that strength. So it's now 10:54. We've been on the air for 2.5 hours. I'm going to ask Neil to come back and just join me. What a show. We got to cover the politics with Andrew Hacker, and we got to connect the medicine topic with Dr. Lisa Ganjhu. Folks, please go back into the archives so that you can see this. The recording will start as soon as we get off the air. So in fact, that's a reason for us to get off the air, but we do have to thank our sponsors. And Neil's going to do a promo for next week. I'm going to do my promo now for tonight. 9 p.m. Eastern is our positivity show. We have terrific guests who are joining us. Please take a look. 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is 1 a.m. GMT and 6 p.m. Pacific time. Please join us for my Sunday night positivity. We talk to folks who are experts in positivity or are just positive, purposeful people or both. A great way to prep for the week after a long, long weekend and getting ready for this.
Do you want to say hi to everyone on the show?
So please make sure that you tune in, tell your friends, and right now, tag your friends, hit share right now. Even though this show is over, they can catch the recording. Please email me. I'm looking for guest ideas for all our shows, Sree@Sree.net, SREE@SREE.net. Please also let us know of anyone who'd like to sponsor any of the things we do. We even have a newsletter. If you didn't get a newsletter in your inbox from me today, that means we're not connected yet. Please email me, Sree@Sree.net. We'll get you on our newsletter. Once a week, I try to talk about what's happening, what we're seeing, where things are going. So please do sign up for my newsletter. We're getting incredible open rates, not as good as what Neil gets in his newsletter that he writes every day to 13,000 people at United Way. But we are seeing Pam is Neil's wife. We're seeing his daughter, Emily, having some fun in the back. Emily, thank you for loaning us your dad every Sunday for so many hours. Your dad is helping people at the moment, and you should know that when you grow up, when people ask, what did your family do during the crisis? You will say you stayed home and you were quiet and supportive of your dad. You got to play with your dad and mom. And Neil's going to be able to say he helped so many people understand and make sense of the craziness all around us. So thank you, Emily. You're wonderful, and happy birthday as well.
It was your birthday on Thursday, wasn't it? Yeah. How old did you turn?
7.
7. How many? Is this 7? Wait, what's 7? How many is 7?
Is that 7? I
No,
don't think that's 7.
That's 9. That's 8. That's 7.
7. I love 7.
Sree, I have a question for Emily. Emily, look at me. Are you so the audience can see, right? That's how many fingers do I have?
You have 10 fingers.
Oh, nice.
I have 10 fingers, Sree. You know, I've trained her well.
Yes, you have.
Thank you for joining, Emily.
Thank you.
Well, before we go, Sree, I do want to do a shout out for our production team again.
Yes.
You know, we have Paula Kiger on Facebook, Steve Taylor on LinkedIn. It's one of the things that we always talk about in terms of producing a live stream show. In addition to having Tara join us occasionally, in addition to having Emily join us occasionally, you know, it makes for a richer discussion when we can have people engaging with the audience, dropping links into the discussion, answering questions, addressing audio issues, you know, for example. So thank you very much, Steve and Paula. And if you're interested in having us produce a show like this, as Sree mentioned at the beginning of the show, we actually are producing a number of live stream projects. Thank you, Emily. A number of live stream projects for various clients, conferences, one-off shows, etc. So please feel free to reach out to me or Sree, and we can work with you on that. Our guest next week, as we mentioned earlier, and just want to give a quick shout out.
Me?
No, you're not the guest next week. Sree, do you think we could have Emily on as a guest?
Yeah, of course. Of course. As long as she promises to become a doctor or nurse, we'll.
Are you going to be a doctor or nurse, maybe? No.
I'm good.
What do you like? What do you want to do? She wants to be a vet.
Yeah, that's a doctor. We love.
There are questions about animals and COVID-19.
Yes.
But what I wanted to do is to make it a point to talk about next week's guest. As you saw earlier, Judge Rosemary Aquilina will be joining us, and I'll be the guest host next week. So we're looking forward to that. You'll be able to find this on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please make sure to join us. And then as a shout out to our sponsors, thank you to Strategy Focus Group, Muckrack, as Sree is showing, and TweetsMap for all their support.
And we have links to them. Please click on these links, folks. If you like what we do here, this is a labor of love, but now we're getting a little bit of money coming in. We want more sponsors, but we want the sponsors we have to love what we do. So please click on the links that we are going to put into Facebook so that you can click on the exact links so they can track it back to us on Strategy Focus Group, Muckrack, and TweetsMap. And thank you to our sponsors, Ronald Thomas, Greg Gallant, Mike Schneider, and Samir. We're so grateful to all of you for supporting us. They say that Bruce Springsteen says he never forgets who gave him his first $5 to do a musical show. And I'll never forget these sponsors who sponsored this show. We've got multiple sponsors of our daily show. So we would love your support. We also have sponsors of our newsletter. And Paul is putting in various links. And Stefan says that Emily does need to be a guest one day soon. And so that'd be fun. And anyway, so thank you all for watching. 2.5 hours of live now. An hour and a half probably tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. A big shout out to the families that let us do this. You met Emily, Pam on Neil's side, my family, Rupa, Durga, and Krishna, and Tara on my family, the folks and our producers who let them do all this, and our guests. The weekend is supposed to be a time of downtime, but we are upping the amount of time we're spending doing things together online. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for watching. And we still have a debrief after this, Neil, right? So we got to do that for a couple of minutes, and then we got to get back to our Sunday. So let's say
one correction, Sree. Although you saw Emily earlier, you didn't see Pam.
Right.
Just you did not see Pam. She did not appear on the video. If I need to hold a pen up to your eyes, I'll do that, Men in Black style. You can erase that.
We'll get in trouble if she ever shows up on the show, right? She's told you not to put her on the show.
Exactly. We're always looking at the camera angles to make sure we do that. But
thank you, Pam. Thank you, Pam.
Yes. Thank you. And again, just to remind folks, we're here every week at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. You can find our archives on YouTube. And we look forward to having you join us next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.